1963, the civil rights movement began to explode. Martin Luther King led a march on Washington, and yes, I felt that he was an Uncle Tom until I had a chance to sit down with his wife, Coretta Scott King, who began to show us that there were similarities between he and I. As my father was a Garveyite, King's father was a Garveyite. Marcus Garvey, a man who preached black nationalism. And Martin Luther King, when he was doing well in school and skipping grades in elementary, I was getting straight A's and I was a class president. Martin Luther King, when he went on to college at 15 years old, I was hustling in the street. But when he was getting his master's and his doctorate degree, getting his education, I was in prison getting my education. And don't look at me funny when I say I was in prison. Y'all still in prison. But Martin Luther King's life would change one day when there was a woman who had just finished working hard all day. She was very, very tired. She had an arm full of shopping bags, so this time she decided she wouldn't move. So the bus driver was furious, and he said, "Woman, if you don't give up your seat, I'm going to call the police and you'll be taken to jail. Do you plan to get up?" Well, she politely said, "No, sir." So he called the police, and they came, and they took Rosa Parks to jail. And while she was behind bars in a cold cell, word got to a young 25-year-old minister now, Martin Luther King Jr., who was so moved, he said he'd stand with Rosa Parks even if it cost him his life. So he told all the people to stop riding the bus. But what that meant was they'd have to walk miles and miles to go to school. And they'd have to walk miles and miles to go to work. They'd take taxi cabs, they'd carpool, but they wouldn't ride the bus. And then Martin Luther King was in jail. Well, while he was in jail, everybody felt like giving up because 6 months had gone by and there was no change. So when Martin Luther King was released, he stood before them all to inspire them. And he went on to say, "I know some of you all are asking yourselves this afternoon, how long will it take? But I want you to know, no matter how difficult the moment, no matter how frustrating the hour, it won't be long. Because truth pressed to the earth will rise again. How long? Not long. Because no lie can live forever. How long? Not long, because you still reap what you sow. How long? Not long, because the arm of the moral universe is long, but it still bends its way toward justice. How long? Not long, because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He's loosed his fatal lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. He's sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He's lifted up the hearts of man before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. I came to understand that Martin Luther King, when he was in jail, he'd write down his ideas. One idea he wrote down, he called it his dream. I feel that we need to wake up. And he took that dream in front of hundreds, maybe even thousands of people, and he inspired them. But the Ku Klux Klan's response to that speech was the bombing of a church where there were 4 little girls in attendance. Now, we are a peaceful people. We love everyone who loves us, but we do not love anyone who does not love us. We are nonviolent with those who are nonviolent with us, but we are not nonviolent with anyone who is violent with us. And in Birmingham, Alabama, they spray down youth with fire hose. They sick police dogs on little black boys and girls. I had my own response to the "I Have a Dream" speech, where I'd go on to say, "Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, and I see some enemies. We are surrounded here by police, both in uniform and undercover. And if they'll be peaceful, we'll be peaceful." In that great farce on Washington, which you call the March on Washington, the white man had you fooled, had you thinking you were really going somewhere where all you really were doing was marching in between the feet of a dead man named Lincoln and the feet of a dead man named Washington. Oh, I know you don't like what I'm saying, but I'm going to tell you anyway because I can prove what I'm saying. You bring me king, bring me farmer, bring me Randolph, and those other three and see if they'll deny it over a microphone. No, it was a sellout. It was a takeover. It was a circus, clowns and all. They infiltrated it. What do you do with coffee when it's too strong? You integrate it with cream. Then it ceases to wake you up. It puts you to sleep. And most of you all like cream in your coffee because if it's too black, it's too strong. Oh, yes. And when I made the comment about President Kennedy's death, chickens coming home to roost, what I meant was I felt that his death was an inside job, that the corruption that he denied in the government had come back to bite him. I felt that it was hypocritical that President Kennedy would tell other nations to do the right thing by their people when under his nose there are 20 million black Americans who are being mistreated all the time. And when the people in Birmingham, Alabama, called out to President Kennedy, he said that they were breaking no federal laws. But when the black people got the best of the white man and began to fight back to defend themselves, that Kennedy sent down the National Guard, but there were no new laws. And so I felt that I was justified in saying chickens coming home to roost. But there came a point in time when I had an opportunity to go over into Mecca. And when I went there to receive the Hajj, I was received by all brothers as a Muslim. Our struggle was known throughout the world. When I arrived, I had never received such sincere hospitality and true brotherhood as I did in the land of the prophets. Along with thousands of other Muslims, I was able to proclaim the greatness of the name of God. I was able to make 7 circuits around the Kaaba, drink from the well of Zemzem, pray in Mount Arafat to God. I know you may find this hard to believe, but there I was able to drink from the same cup and eat from the same plate and sleep on the same mat with Muslims whose skin was whiter than white and eyes bluer than blue. I had come to understand and gain a greater understanding of the problem in America. The Afro-American cannot be blamed for the racism there. He is only responding to 400 years of oppression. But it is my belief that true Islam can free the Afro-American. I've made sweeping indictments and generalizations of all white people. And in making those generalizations, I've injured some white people who did not deserve it. I will no longer make sweeping generalizations of one race. I am not a racist and do not ascribe to any form of racism, but wish life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice to all humankind. Because it is not just an American problem, but it is a world problem. It is not just between black or white, but between the oppressed and the oppressor. It is not just a civil rights issue, but a human rights issue. Racism is a disease. And if there's any light or any truth that I can shed to remove this cancer from the earth, from humanity, then all credit is due to God. Only the mistakes have been mine.
Welcome to Decision Point. What made the 60s radical Malcolm X tick, and why could we benefit from the life and influence of this man? My guest, Darius Wallace, does a one-man show, which you just saw an example of, which sheds light on this issue. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, we're glad that you're here in this area. You know, you're coming all the way from Memphis. I know you travel all over the United States to perform.
Yes.
So we're glad to have you here. Why Malcolm X? I know you do a lot of different one-man shows, but why this particular guy is so controversial?
Well, the reason why I think Malcolm X is important to do is because the grassroots urban folk and urban youth in particular, they are Malcolm X in a grand sense. Like a lot of African American youth and Latino youth, Malcolm X experienced a broken home. He ended up in the street and became a hustler, became a criminal. and then at a very young age was sent to prison. And he was sent to prison. It was a 10-year sentence, of which he served 9 years. But what I want young people to see is then what he did in prison. He made a decision that he was going to use his time to read, to educate himself, and to write. And so he did. And then also that when he came upon his own religious conviction, and what we need to know about Malcolm is that when he was in prison, he had become an atheist because of all the horrible things that have happened to him and his father and his parents and his brothers and sisters in the past. But when he had gained a conviction spiritually, he humbled himself and committed himself to that religious path until he grew and committed himself to a new religious path that helped him be more international in his ideas and be more accepting of people that were not like him.
So why did the Nation of Islam, which was, I guess, his first conversion experience, so to speak, why did that appeal so much to him? What was it about that?
Well, the reason why was because, you know, when Malcolm was probably about 10 years old, he was class president in his elementary school. And he was in an all-white school, and this is back in the 1930s.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and he was class president, made straight A's. The teacher asked him, said, "What do you want to be when you grow up, Malcolm?" You know, because the teacher was very impressed with him. He said, "I want to be a lawyer so I can protect people." And the teacher basically said that it was unrealistic for him to consider being a lawyer, that he needed to think more about being a janitor. And from that moment on, he began to have low self-esteem and began to question the way that he looked. Why was his hair different than the other kid's hair? Why was his nose broader than the other kid's nose and lips? So when he was in prison, he heard about the Nation of Islam and that Islam was a religion for the black man. And within that doctrine, he began to take pride in how he looked, take pride in who he was. And so I believe that it was because of what the Nation of Islam had to offer as far as black pride was something that appealed to Malcolm, especially based on his past.
Right. Well, so basically he associated Christianity with the white man and oppression, and the Nation of Islam with the black man and being proud of his heritage.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that unfortunately his experience from 1 year old, his father's home was burned down by the Ku Klux Klan in Omaha, Nebraska, and then in Lansing, Michigan, when his father moved him there, his home was burned down again by the Ku Klux Klan, and then his father was killed by the Ku Klux Klan. And so a lot of what he associated that was white, he saw as something full of hate. So that by the time he came into the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad gave him that fatherly love and helped him come to respect himself and to love himself. And he said it was one of the happiest periods of his life was when he accepted Islam.
Yeah, and that's probably still true today when you see the Nation of Islam and what a lot of black youth experience. Would you agree? I mean,
I would have to say so. You know, the Nation of Islam is a religion that takes the drugs out of your hands, takes the alcohol out of your hands, forbids you from gambling, asks you to be kind, courteous, respectful, and to obey the law. So, you know, in that respect, it takes youth or people that are troubled and changes their lives. They have a whole diet that they abide by, and all these things helped Malcolm become who he was.
So there was a level of structure that he really needed, and then the father figure and all of that, and so it maybe had less to do with the faith aspect of it and just more of the culturalization, so to speak, into healthy, positive ways of living. Would you say so, or
I think both actually. I think that it was for him it was a faith that gave him positive living, gave him a sense of brotherhood, and gave him a father figure that he could look up to at that time. But Malcolm was very sincere when he was an atheist, but he also was very sincere when he became a Muslim.
He was when he did something, he did it all the way.
He did it 100%.
He was a great criminal too, I guess.
He was a great criminal as well.
Yeah. Now, this is, this is kind of interesting because we're Christians. You and I are both Christians, and so what would you say about Christianity and what we're doing wrong with particularly the black youth of today, because we're still losing so many of them to gangs and that kind of thing. So, obviously we believe Christianity is the truth, and the Nation of Islam is not the best thing for these people. So how do you reconcile that with your own thoughts about your faith and so forth?
Well, I believe that, when you take a look at Jesus, the only sermon that I have ever seen in the Testaments is the Sermon on the Mount. But everything else that we see of Jesus were actions, acts that he did out in the community that he lived in. And Jesus was one that was not afraid of the Roman powers.
Right.
That when it got to a point where Jesus was reaching Roman soldiers, Roman soldiers were coming to him for help.
Sure.
He became a problem to the Roman government at that time.
Yeah.
Jesus wasn't trying to appease the religious structure of that time. He was a Pharisee, Jesus was, but he wouldn't follow through with the way that Pharisees did things. He was more about the people. And I think that we need to be more about the people. We need to be more about outreach. And we also need to be more about sacrifice. And I think that was the thing that Malcolm found in the Nation of Islam. He found more of a relationship to him as a person and more of a sacrificial outreach in spite of the religious orders of that day or the American government. And so I think that we as Christians have to learn from that, just as we do when we go on a foreign mission. When we go on a foreign mission, it's about the people. We're not afraid at that time about the government. We put ourselves in harm's way. We end up in jail or in prison. But here in America, we don't seem to have that same kind of, as a whole, that same kind of outreach.
Now you're really pretty amazing in the way that you incorporate music and poetry and Shakespeare and everything into your shows, which if anybody ever has the opportunity to see that, can you give us an example of how you use poetry in this particular show?
Sure.
With Malcolm X?
Well, Malcolm, when he was in prison, he read a lot. He read through the Bible from cover to cover. He read through the Quran from cover to cover. He read through the canon of Shakespeare, the dictionary from cover to cover. So he would quote Shakespeare from time to time. So I open up the performance as he's in the last moment of his life, because he knew he was going to be killed.
So now he was assassinated?
He was assassinated
by the Nation of Islam, is that right? Or the people involved in that?
Well, that's what has been put out there. John Ali, who was I believe the national, I think it was the secretary, but he had a very important role in the Nation of Islam, was actually an FBI informant. That's something you can read in the FBI files. And the FBI had heavily put themselves into different elements of the Nation of Islam. You also had NYPD that was very upset with Malcolm because of his stance in Harlem. Then you also had Mafia that were frustrated with Malcolm because he was getting people off of drugs. Their business was to have people on drugs.
Right.
And then you did have elements of the Nation of Islam that was angry with Malcolm because of his the things he had begun to say about Elijah Muhammad. But then Malcolm had people within his own organization that was angry with him because of what happened to him in Mecca. When, as I said in the performance, that he drank from the same cup and ate from the same plate and slept on the same mat as white Muslims whose skin is white as white, eyes are blue as blue. And he began to shift, as Martin Luther King did, from it being civil rights to human rights. Right. He also was going to take the United States government to the international court violation of human rights. So Malcolm was stepping on a lot of toes, so there were probably a lot of different factions that had to do with Malcolm's assassination, but he did know what he believed to be the men that were going to do that. And so in the show, in the last moment of his life, I have him reciting Hamlet, which he did a lot. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take up arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more. And by asleep we say, to end the heartache and thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. And in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we've shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause.
Yeah, that fits perfectly, doesn't it? Yeah. So he knew that his life was...
Yes, absolutely. He knew that Malcolm always, after his house was bombed and his children were there, if one of the firebombs had gone through the window, it would have killed three of his children. He began to feel that he was more of a danger to his family alive than dead. So the last day of his life, he did odd things. He didn't have, normally you have to be patted down at the door. He didn't do that. All of the men that surrounded him were sharpshooters and were actually experts with firearms, and he had them moved away. He parked 20 blocks from the Audubon Ballroom and walked. I think that at that time, he knew that it was going to happen eventually, and he probably believed that his message would do better with him gone than alive, and that his family would be safer with him gone than alive. So, that's just my opinion.
So almost a martyr in a sense.
Yeah,
for his cause. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
In terms of other shows that you do, I know what are some of the other shows that you have done before? I know we've had you on the show last year.
Sure.
Also, yeah.
Yeah, I do Frederick Douglass, of course. I do Martin Luther King, and I also do Langston Hughes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now, how do you go about deciding which shows you're going to do and which people you're going to portray?
I like to find those characters who are transformed, mainly by the power of the written spoken word. That helps out a lot, because I believe that, for young people, for them to see that words are powerful, and that words are transformative, and that reading is powerful, and that reading is transformative. So.
And you have your own faith walk. When did you come to Christ?
I came to Christ when I was in college at SUNY Purchase. I had a pretty amazing experience there. And my confirmation to my relationship to God is the power of prayer. Being able to pray to God, go within myself to pray to God and to see the results of God's faithfulness. It says that when we're faithless, He remains faithful because He cannot deny Himself.
Yeah, that's good. Now, you're also a filmmaker, and you have one of your film was released, I guess, recently on Amazon.
That's right.
Which film was that?
It's a film called 100 Lives. It is a film that is about forgiveness. It's all about a school teacher whose 4-year-old daughter is the 100th homicide victim, and what he and his wife do in response to that, and their journey toward being able to forgive is what the movie's about.
And it's actually a drama and so forth. And film?
That's right. It is a drama.
It's not a documentary.
It is not. It is not a documentary, and it is not a factual story. It's a fictional story. Yeah,
well, it's definitely, you kind of have your hands in a lot of different things. It's kind of hard to keep up with all of it, I'm sure. But
at times, yeah, it can be. It could be trying.
Yeah. Who's your favorite character out of all the ones that you've done?
Frederick Douglass is my favorite character because he, of all of them, he's born into chattel slavery, But Frederick Douglass, in his autobiography, said that he knew at 7 years old that he wasn't supposed to be a slave. And so from that moment on, he began to work toward freeing himself, which he did, and achieved a lot of phenomenal things throughout his life, advising President Lincoln and becoming an ambassador to Haiti and the Dominican Republic and many other great things that Frederick Douglass, did in his lifetime. So.
Now, you actually do a lot of research and find things that other people haven't portrayed before or publicized before about Frederick Douglass and some of these people, right?
I do. I think it's important to find the humanity in these men, because we make them into demigods, and we forget that they were men and that they were not perfect, and that in their time, it's easy for us now to say what they did was right, but living at that time, they were up against great odds, but they had great courage.
Right.
So.
How has doing Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X changed you?
Oh, that's a very good question. Having to see their ability to transform, words are very powerful to me also. And seeing what difference it made in their lives, it has made a great difference in my life. When I'm up against challenges, I have to take a look at what they went through and what I'm going through, and realize that I can get through it as well.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful having you here. Thank you so much again
for
that inspiring segment of your performance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Holly. I really appreciate it.
Good, good. So do you understand and appreciate the life of men like Malcolm X a little bit better? Will you join me in praying for the millions of fatherless, wounded young men who need to come to know the power of Jesus in their lives? Please let me know what you think on Facebook, Twitter, or kscetv.com. Thank you for watching.
Please consider partnering with us so that together KSCE Life can continue to broadcast the best Christian programs for your viewing enjoyment and blessing. Contributions can be sent to KSCE Life Christian Television, or through our website, or by phoning the office Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Together, we will make a difference.